Thank you for joining our webinar on Deep Dive into the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program. My name is Lauren Walker, and I am a research analyst at Access Lex Institute. Joining me are my colleagues, Rob Hunter, Senior Research Analyst, and Kristen English, Grants Program Administrator. First, I want to briefly highlight what we do. As a nonprofit organization, Access Lex strives to help purpose-driven students find their path from aspiring lawyer to fulfilled professional. In partnership with our nearly 200-member law schools, we are committed to improving access and positively influencing legal education. This presentation will provide an overview of Access Lex grants programs with an emphasis on the scope and requirements for the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program. We will then focus on what to expect in the application process. Data on the number of proposals received and funded will be shared. We will also offer tips on how to draft a strong proposal. Lastly, application resources will be provided, followed by a question and answer session. We believe in an impact-driven approach to grant making. We place a special emphasis on increasing access. We want to support research and interventions that will help ensure that all aspiring attorneys are able to enter law school, attain the support and resources they will need to thrive and succeed academically, and pass the bar exam. We are also deeply invested in fostering an inclusive and diverse legal profession. For this reason, we fund projects that have the potential to move the needle in legal education. We operate 3 grant programs. The Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program seeks to broaden access to legal education, ensuring that students from underrepresented backgrounds and underserved communities can enter law school. The Bar Success Intervention Grant Program focuses on curricular and institutional interventions that prepare current law students and recent law graduates who are most at risk of not passing the bar exam. The Bar Success Research Grant Program supports empirical research to better understand the substance and format of the bar exam. Rob will discuss the scope and requirements for the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program in the next section.
Thank you, Lauren. So as Lauren told you, our Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program, which we are here to discuss today, is intended to further our goals as an institution of improving diversity and inclusion in legal education and in the legal profession as a whole. And to that end, the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program is focused on pipeline programs that target current college students or recent college graduates who come from historically underrepresented populations or historically underserved populations in higher education in order to help them enter into and succeed in law school. And it is our aim as a grant-making organization to fund pipeline programs that can be shown to be effective that can be adopted by other institutions in legal education, such that the legal education community as a whole has an increased knowledge base about best practices and what techniques and resources are best suited for helping all of the students that we are interested in helping to succeed, thrive, and flourish. There are several requirements that proposals, both letters of inquiry and full applications, which Kristen will discuss in greater detail later, must comply with in order to be considered for our grant program. First, they must have a duration of 12 to 24 months, that's 1 to 2 years, and they must seek funding in the amount of $200,000 to $300,000. All proposed pipeline programs must focus on current college students or recent college graduates who are from underrepresented backgrounds. This includes underrepresented and historically underserved racial and ethnic backgrounds, as well as underrepresented socioeconomic backgrounds such as first-generation law students. All proposals must have clear articulations of their goals, the objectives that will be pursued in order to further those goals, and the specific outcomes that will result from each one of those objectives being accomplished. And finally, all proposals must include a rigorous evaluation plan that specifies how data will be collected and how it will be analyzed in order to demonstrate what worked and what did not work in the proposed pipeline program. There are some additional elements that will be given preference when considering proposals, but I want to stress that these are optional. The first is that we will give additional consideration to proposals that focus on participants, again, current college students or recent college graduates, who will be entering law school within 2 years of the start of the desired grant period. We will also give additional consideration to proposals that focus on participants who have low standardized test scores or low undergraduate GPAs. We will give additional consideration to proposed projects that will give differential treatment to different populations of participants for the purposes of evaluating the program. In other words, those that make a distinction between treatment and control groups. We will give additional consideration to proposals that specify whether and how long-term support for the students who participate in them will be made available, particularly long-term support that will extend beyond the life of the grant duration. And finally, additional consideration will be given to those proposals that specify whether and how the institution seeking funding will collaborate with other law schools, with other universities, with cognate programs within the university or in your region, or other organizations working in the legal education space. And now Kristen will discuss the particulars of the application process.
Thanks, Rob. So now we'll do a quick walkthrough of the steps of our application process. You can find this information on our grant application policy page of our website. And all application and supporting materials must be submitted through our online system, so you will need to create an account in our system to apply. Your first step when you want to apply for a grant should be to make sure your organization and program meet our eligibility requirements by reviewing the grant program resources and policy that I mentioned on our website. Access Lex does fund proposals from our member law schools and other tax-exempt U.S.-based nonprofit and public organizations. To be eligible, your program or project must align with the program-specific funding priorities that Lauren and Rob have outlined. So after you've determined your eligibility, you'll need to create an account in the online system to begin your letter of inquiry. Submission of a letter of inquiry is required to be eligible for funding. So the LOI form is designed to elicit brief information about your program or project as outlined on this slide here. Your responses should help reviewers to better understand the purpose of your proposal and how your intervention or research will be structured and implemented. We do require a brief budget narrative where you outline how the funds will be allocated in the event of an award, but you are not required to submit an itemized budget during the letter of inquiry phase. All LOI are reviewed and applicants are informed whether or not they're invited to submit a full proposal. So this is a competitive process and not all applicants that submitted an LOI will be invited to submit a full proposal. So the select number of applicants who are invited to submit a full proposal will not necessarily receive funding. But the responses in the full proposal should build on and clarify the information from your LOI, not simply research. Proposals need to include a detailed timeline of your project, including important milestones, and we do require an itemized budget during the full proposal phase that should be submitted on the Access Lex template that is available in our application system and on our website. So our budget is broken down into direct and indirect costs. Direct costs are expenses directly attributed to the specific project or program And indirect costs are any non-project specific expenses that help your organization to do business. Indirect costs cannot equal more than 10% of the direct costs of your budget, and you can find a detailed breakdown of what we consider direct versus indirect costs on our website. Lauren will go into more detail on elements of a strong proposal shortly, so we will get back to that. So after the review of all the full proposals, a select few applicants will receive a funding invitation. As I said before, this is a competitive process, so not all applicants that are invited to submit a full proposal will receive funding. Those that do will be required to fully execute a grant agreement within 90 days of the funding invitation. We do have a standard grant agreement that we ask all applicants to review during the full proposal phase of the process. And we do also like to highlight that section 6 of that grant agreement does contain some publicity provisions that we ask people to review. The grant agreement also outlines the payment and reporting schedule for the grant, and all interim reports and final reports are submitted through our online grant system. So now I'll hand it back over to Rob to talk about some recent application trends.
Thank you, Kristen. So we would like to briefly describe some statistics from our recent grant application cycles before Lauren will discuss in detail the tips for crafting competitive proposals. In our 2019 cycle, we received over 50 letters of inquiry, that's 51, and we subsequently received 11 full proposals, 3 of which were ultimately funded. In the 2020 cycle, we received a similar number of letters of inquiry, 45. We received a total of 6 full proposals, one of which eventually received full funding at the conclusion of the grant cycle. And in the current grant cycle, we received 38 letters of inquiry. Those institutions that were awarded full grants, in the last 2 application cycles were, in 2019, St. John's University School of Law, Syracuse University School of Law, and Wayne State University. In 2020, a grant was awarded to the University of North Texas at Dallas. Before Lauren goes into detail about the elements of a strong proposal, I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you what we at Access Lex consider to be the characteristics of high-impact diversity pipeline programs. They have clear goals, objectives, and outcomes. And again, goals are what is intended to be accomplished by the pipeline program. Objectives are the concrete steps that are taken, and the outcomes are generated as a result of securing those objectives. High-impact pipeline programs also have well-defined scopes and well-defined criteria for the eligibility for student participation. They have strong programming support and infrastructure available to assist students and to ensure that students have the resources that they need, the relationships that they need, the faculty interaction that they need in order to succeed. And crucially, high-impact diversity pipeline programs have rigorous assessment and evaluation frameworks, and we will discuss this in greater detail soon.
Thank you, Rob. In this section, I will offer tips on how to draft a strong proposal with an emphasis on the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program. In general, we look for the following elements in intervention-based proposals: a clear statement of what your program aims to achieve or the goals, the specific actions that you will take to achieve your goals or the objectives, and what you expect to observe or measure in the intervention or the expected outcomes. A clearly defined scope of what you aim to address or mitigate and who will be eligible to participate in the program. A specific focus on program components that are relevant to the intervention. A well-designed measurement plan that includes a rigorous assessment and evaluation plan, a well-defined and realistic timetable for implementing the program activities and collecting data, and lastly, an emphasis on the replication, scale-up, and continuation of the program beyond the grant period. A strong proposal should have a strong statement of goals, objectives, and expected outcomes. The goals should be broad statements that should be directly related to the problem or issue that you seek to address. Focus on what success would look like for your program and how you will measure the success of your program. The objectives should describe what participants will learn and be able to do by the end of the grant period. The expected outcomes should be specific, realistic, and tied to the goals and objectives. A strong proposal should have a clearly defined scope and participant eligibility. Think carefully about the size and scope of your intervention and its relationship to existing interventions and programs at your institution. For example, how many participants will your program serve? Growth is good, but don't take on more participants than you can handle. And we also want to emphasize that the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program focuses on college students and college graduates who have not been accepted into law school. A strong proposal should focus on a manageable number of program components. Focus on the most important components of your program. The intervention should provide holistic support as well as meaningful content and experiences. At the same time, avoid taking on many different components that are not directly related to your intervention. Also remember your goals. Every aspect of your intervention should advance one of your objectives and produce an outcome. A strong proposal should have a rigorous assessment and evaluation plan. Describe the data that you will collect to evaluate your program outcomes, how the data will be attained, and the methods you will use to analyze the data. In many cases, a pre- and post-test assessment is appropriate. For example, you may want to administer a diagnostic test, such as the LSAT, before and after the intervention to measure change among the participants. Describe the types of assessments you will use for your evaluation. Assessments can include either formative evaluation or summative evaluation. Formative evaluation focuses on the ongoing process of the program to gain information about student learning and to ensure that the activities are being delivered efficiently and effectively. In contrast, summative evaluation takes place by the end of the program activities and focuses on the outcome to determine if an intervention was successful. You may also want to use both formative and summative evaluation, also known as a mixed methods research design, which is conducted continually over the course of the intervention. Lastly, consider whether there are program assessment and evaluation resources or specialists that you can consult with or bring on your team for collaboration. A strong proposal should have well-defined and realistic timetable for completion. Consider whether the intervention is achievable within the grant program timeline. The programmatic and assessment activities should also be appropriate in the context of the law school application process. Also, think in terms of objectives and outcomes. The timing should allow participants sufficient time to absorb the content and perform program activities essential for data collection and analysis. Finally, a strong proposal should place an emphasis on generalizability, scalability, and sustainability. Consider whether similarly sized organizations and other pipeline programs can adopt your intervention. Focus on whether your intervention can be scaled up to work across legal education pipeline programming as a whole. And finally, develop strategies for funding and continuing the program after the end of the grant period. Additional considerations for applicants in the next section.
Thank you, Lauren. So we have been talking quite a lot about assessments, and we're going to talk about some more. So for those applicants who submit letters of inquiry and are subsequently invited to submit full proposals, so make it to the second stage of the application cycle, all institutions who submit full proposals will work with an independent evaluation consultant designated by Access Lex, who will help them to develop their evaluation program for their proposed pipeline program, and will work with them to design an appropriate and rigorous evaluation plan in order to accomplish the goals that Lauren just described. As a part of that process of designing a full proposal, all institutions that submit a full proposal will be required to also submit a proposed monthly timeline of program assessments. As Lauren indicated, this might consist of formative assessments, or it might consist of the administration and analysis of diagnostic tests. It depends on the particulars of your program. Lastly, there are some general considerations that you should always keep in mind when you are working on your letters of inquiry and your full proposals. And despite being general, they are nonetheless very important, and so we want to stress them here. First, plan ahead. Please visit our website so that you can be aware of the relevant dates and the materials that you will need to submit. Take the time to talk with your colleagues, especially those with whom you would be collaborating on your diversity pipeline program. Second, please be careful to proofread your application to be sure that you are providing all of the data and all of the information that will be necessary in order for us to evaluate your letter of inquiry or your full proposal fully. And finally, at every stage of the application process, seek feedback from your colleagues, whether or not they are those who are going to be eventually working with you as you implement your program, in order to make sure that you have a diversity of perspectives that are informing the design of your proposal.
So all of our grant programs operate on a similar review schedule to what you see here. We do require that LOI, and then we move into the full proposal phase. Again, this is a competitive process. Our dates are set annually, and we are in the middle of our 2021 Diversity Intervention Grant Program. So if you did not submit an LOI already to this year's program, your next opportunity to do so will be during the 2022 cycle. And we do expect that that cycle will open in early February. The dates here you see are tentative, so I recommend that you check back on our website in a few months to see if these dates have changed or are finalized. And you can visit our website for detailed information about all of our grant programs. This includes previews of our LOI and full proposal, our application policy, frequently asked questions, and other resources. If you have questions about our grant programs, your application or grant, or if you need assistance with the website or our online application system, you can email us at grants@accesslex.org, and we'll route your question appropriately and get back to you as soon as possible. So now I'll hand it back over to Lauren to wrap up the presentation part of the webinar.
Thank you, Kristen. We will now invite questions from the audience and take this opportunity to respond to them. We want to clarify any confusion that you may have about preparing either an LOI or a full proposal. And if we believe the question raised from the chat is important for everyone, we will give our responses verbally. And I see that Kristen has been responding to a few of them already. So I'm going to highlight one question from William. with a comprehensive pipeline project that ushers underrepresented individuals starting in high school and carry on through law school be eligible, or must applicants focus exclusively on college students and or graduates? The response for that is that we prefer proposals that focus particularly on college students and college graduates who have not applied to law school, with a preference on college students in their last 2 years of college. Let's see. The next question is about states, would it be possible to make public a successful program proposal? It would be very helpful to see how a successful pipeline program is designed. We typically do not share program proposals to the public, but we do have a frequently asked questions website on our grants programs that you can look at to see what is it that we are looking for or what we are prioritizing in the submissions. And then the next question is, does Access Lex offer any support or advice in designing pipeline programs, specifically with respect to assessment and monitoring the progress of students in the program overall? Rob, can you respond to that?
Sure thing. Thank you. So again, the question is, does Access Lex offer any support or advice in designing pipeline programs, specifically with respect to assessment and monitoring the progress of students in the program overall? There are two things that I want to say in response to this. First, we always invite questions at any stage of the process. So that email address that you see there on the screen, grants@accesslex.org, you can send us an email and we will respond to you as quickly as possible. I want to emphasize that conversations with us do not automatically result in any additional consideration being given to your proposal, but we welcome questions. It's part of our commitment to transparency, and we want to be as transparent as possible and to provide feedback whenever we can and whenever it's appropriate. As I did mention, those institutions who submit LOIs and are ultimately invited to submit full proposals will work with an Access Lex evaluation consultant in order to develop and refine the evaluation components of their programs. But for the purposes of designing LOIs, the first thing that you should do is to take a close look at our website, where we do discuss this in our FAQs. Also to go to arc.accesslex.org, that's arc.accesslex.org, where we have links to a variety of research materials and programming materials that are relevant to diversity and inclusion in legal education and other areas of legal education. And those are the places where I would suggest beginning. If you have a particular question that you want to discuss in depth, again, the first thing to do is to contact us.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. The next question is there any value in reapplying with the same idea, but hopefully stronger proposals? Or is a rejected LOI an indication that we need to try something else? So the response to that question is it depends. You are more than welcome to resubmit the same proposal if it's within the scope and requirements of the grant program. And you are also allowed to seek feedback, and we will provide feedback regarding your question of why your LOI or full proposal was rejected. Again, I just want to emphasize that you are more than welcome to submit the same proposal with the same idea, as long as it fits the scope and requirements of the grant program. And Rob, did you want to add anything else to that as well?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you.
Okay. The next question is, if my organization scope of participants in this program includes only students who have already been accepted into law school, does this make my organization ineligible to apply for the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program? As I stated in the presentation, we focus on college students and college graduates who have not been accepted to law school. So if your program focuses on incoming, admitted, or current law students, it will not fit the scope of this grant program. Okay, the next question is, does the intervention need to have a defined time period, start and end, or can it be continued? Can it be a continued intervention program that does not necessarily have an end timeline? Rob, can you answer that one?
Certainly, thank you. So if the question is meant to refer to pipeline programs that are operating indefinitely, then of course the timeline does not need to have a stopping point. In general, it's always the case that we encourage and want to support pipeline programs that are reproducible and sustainable. And so we are not envisioning that these will be one-off affairs. However, for the purposes of the grant program, we are looking for ways of gathering information about best practices and identifying what works and what doesn't. And for that reason, it is very important that full proposals, and LOIs for that matter, specify how the success of the program is going to be conceived and how it is going to be measured. And for that reason, it is important for the specific project, as opposed to the pipeline program as a whole, the specific project that is laid out in the LOI and the full proposal must necessarily have a beginning point and an ending point. And the ending point should fall at a time when meaningful achievements will have been made or meaningful milestones will have been reached, so that the evaluation information that is produced by the project will be informative not just to the grantee or to Access Lex, but to the legal education community as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Rob. The next question is, what are some reasons that Access Lex has rejected full proposals in the past? So the response for that question is application cycles, they vary each year. In some years, some proposals are stronger than others. And when the review committee looks at proposals, we are taking into effect, like, do they meet our funding priorities? Do they have a rigorous assessment and evaluation plan? And also the other tips that I offered throughout the presentation. So again, you may have reached the full proposal stage, but again, you are competing with other applicants and in that pool. And Rob, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, thank you. In general, the features of full proposals that are not ultimately successful vary, but there are some common themes that Lauren alluded to. One is, of course, a kitchen sink approach. So if the proposal is ambitious to the point where it is difficult to see how the relevant resources could be brought to bear, the relevant training could take place, and the participant recruitment could occur in such a time for the program to be successful, that is a consideration that comes into play when we are evaluating full proposals. These are the projects that are being proposed in applications to this program are discrete and time limited, unlike the pipeline programs, which we hope are persistent and will serve multiple cohorts of students from one year to the next. And so for that reason, it's important for the projects to be achievable. And a kitchen sink approach has often been an issue when considering full proposals in the past.
Thank you, Rob. The next question is, do you consider the benefit of theory-based interventions? And if there are pilot data for the intervention, where would that be considered? The response for that would be that we do consider proposals that have a strong theoretical and conceptual framework. And I do recommend browsing our LOI and full proposal applications, which are available on the website. Applicants and prospective and current applicants can preview both applications to see where exactly that information will fit in, but we do consider proposals with a strong theoretical and conceptual framework. And I do believe one of the questions on the application, I don't have it in front of me, does inquire if you have done a previous evaluation, and if so, to describe that, that evaluation.
Thank you, Lauren. I'd just like to chime in and reiterate that if you specify the theoretical foundations for your intervention, we will that is certainly something that we will consider closely. So it is worthy of noting in your letter of inquiry, along with any pilot or preliminary data that you have already accumulated.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So the next question is, could the evaluation of the intervention bridge into, say, the first semester of law school? I just want to clarify that as long as the intervention applies to participants who have not yet applied to law school, if they have been admitted into law school and then they're going to be in their first semester, that's fine. But the intervention has to focus on participants who have not yet applied to law school. Now, if they are admitted into law school during, say, the middle or the end of the grant period, again, that's fine. We just do not focus on programs of where the students have already been admitted into law school, and it's basically like it's just a bridge into like the first year curriculum.
If I could briefly step in while Lauren is reading additional questions. Again, I want to emphasize a point that Lauren made, which is that we are focusing on pipeline programs and not bridge programs. And these are related but distinct categories in legal education. We fully expect that rigorous evaluation plans may well extend past the date in which participating students matriculate into law school, and that's fine. That can potentially yield very powerful and important data. But as Lauren said, the intervention itself needs to take place before matriculation.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So the next question is, can your program target students who have applied to law school but have not been admitted? I think my response for that is the context. It depends. If the students, let's see. Generally, we prefer pipeline programs where the participants have not applied to law school yet. So the pipeline programs generally are preparing students either for the LSAT or for the application process. Again, this is a question that will require greater context, and we recommend that you email us at grants@accesslex.org. And I think with more information, we would be able to provide a more concrete response. So we have about 19 minutes remaining, and please feel free to ask any other questions that you may have. So this question was already answered, but I will mention it to the entire group. Will this webinar be recorded and the link sent out? The answer is that a copy of the video recording will be emailed to those who registered for this webinar. And I believe the presentation slides will be posted on the website at a later date. And then as a follow-up, if you have specific questions regarding the full proposal, we do recommend emailing us at grants@accesslex.org so that we can provide a more appropriate response.
And I hope everyone will forgive me for emphasizing yet another of Lauren's points one more time. Which is that we really do welcome inquiries at any stage. You don't need to have already submitted an LOI or been invited to submit a full proposal. If you have questions at any point, please feel free to reach out to us. This is part of our commitment to being transparent as a grant-making organization. Again, the conversations that you have with us, the questions that you discuss with us, these will not enter into our consideration of the merits of your letter of inquiry or your full proposal, but we are only too happy to discuss your questions with you, and that is a service that we make available to everyone. It can be questions about program evaluation, it can be questions about eligibility, any number of things.
So the next question is, do you find that the most successful proposals utilize several different offices within an institution? Pipelines tend to have a major role in admissions, but I'm trying to gauge the role different partners may have in this process. So the response for that is, it really depends on the design of your intervention and what you are trying to, what you are seeking to address. We have received proposals where the program is collaborating with different offices at the university or with different universities. It can be admissions, it can be financial aid, it can be career services. It really depends on how your intervention is designed. We've also seen proposals where the collaboration is with, say, their teaching and learning or evaluation center on site. We can't really give a concrete answer to that because, again, it really depends on the design of the intervention and what you're seeking to address, but we do welcome collaboration and partnerships if that will enhance your proposal. And Rob, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think you covered it perfectly.
Let's see. The next question is, as part of the application process, will you also consider success in prior law school programs? I'm not exactly sure what exactly you're entailing, but if you can provide more information by contacting us at grants@accesslex.org and provide more detail, we will be able to provide a more appropriate response. And Rob, do you think you could take a stab at this, or would you recommend an email?
It sounds like this the person asking this question should reach out to us directly, just so that we can be clear about what they're asking.
Okay. Again, please feel free to share any questions. Yeah. Okay. Again, if you have more questions, please feel free to consult us at the email address displayed on the slide at grants@accesslex.org. All questions will be redirected to the appropriate staff member. With that said, this concludes our presentation. Thank you again for joining us for Deep Dive into the Diversity Pipeline Intervention Grant Program. We hope you find the information provided in this presentation to be informative and helpful. Finally, please visit accesslex.org to learn more about our grant programs and resources. As a friendly reminder, applicants should carefully follow the grant application review schedule on the website for deadlines and notifications. And we would like to wish everyone a good day and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.